All right. I want to thank everybody that's on Facebook Live, and thanks for also joining our webcast. My name, again, is John Kranz with Compass Games, and I want to thank you for joining us today. Again, we're looking forward to giving you an update on the latest news from Compass Games, and we're going to be getting right into that. If you have any comments, hey, Tim Allen just joined on Facebook. If you have any comments, you can post your comments on Facebook Live. I'll monitor the Facebook live stream to see if you have any questions. And also, if you actually registered for today's webcast, which is a different interface than Facebook, you'll see a Q&A button that you can select. So you go ahead and click on the Q&A button, and you can submit questions for any questions you have, and then I'll be alerted. So basically, I'll be multitasking here today. I'll be watching the Facebook live stream where we have Alan Rothberg and Tim Allen on right now, and there's a little slight delay on it, or I'll be looking at the Q&A window. So the first thing I'd like to do is I want to start with a quick update. We last met last week on May 17th. We had our designer interview with John Gorkowski. Quite a few people attended live, and of course we posted the edited recording, HD recording as well. Had some great feedback on that. I hope for those that haven't seen it already, I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen here for a moment to show you how you can actually get access to that video. So what I've done here is I've actually navigated to the Compass Games homepage, and if I scroll down just a little bit, you'll see we have here episode 3, which was last week on the 17th, and that was our interview with John Gorkowski. So you can watch it from there, or it's on our YouTube channel. Also, it always gets posted on Consum World News. So we had a great episode, a lot of great questions. I think the one big takeaway we had was John mentioned it takes him about 2 or 3 years to complete a design for Red Poppy's campaigns, the game series. There's 2 volumes now, and we just released Red Poppy Campaigns Volume 2. And in order to get more games released, John agreed that he could be a series designer, meaning if there's other designers or developers who want to go ahead and create World War I battles, that we can go ahead and submit to John Gorkowski. We can go ahead and have him help work with whoever would like to do that, and we can get more games out that way. So I think Dave Demko already volunteered to do some battles, World War I battle games as well on the Western Front. But if anybody's interested, you can email me at john@Compass Games. If you're interested in helping contribute, please check out the Red Poppies Campaigns series. And if that's something you'd like to contribute to through research or battles, etc., maybe we can work to get more games out. So that's a little bit about our episode last week. What I'd like to do now is give you an update on our schedule, our release schedule. So again, on our homepage at the very top, on the left side, we have our upcoming titles, as well as recently added to the pre-order list, and then we have our recent releases. So the first thing I want to mention is Blood on the Ohio is our recent release. So that was released just earlier this month in May, about a little over a week ago, by John Paniski. So that game is now available, and it is now shipping since we last talked. So that's why in our status here, we moved it over to the recent releases area. You'll notice we have a slight change in our schedule. Our next release is still Month of the Mire, Anvil of Fate. That's a series from Adam Starkweather, Operational Scale System series game. But we did have to push it out about 2 weeks. We had a final component that is going to take longer to be received. So we pushed out from May 25th to June 10th is the new release date for our next official game release from Compass. So you'll see we actually have 3 game titles now. We have Month of the Mire on June 10th. We then have Paper Wars issue 89, and then Forgotten Legions are the last 2 things we have coming out in June. But Month of the Mire should be out first. Now I want to mention about our next 3 game releases. I want to focus on Paper Wars. So Paper Wars, if you had a prior subscription, it ended with issue number 88. So we're actually now moving over to a new block, a new subscription block. So if you wish to receive Paper Wars issue 89, which will ship on June 12th, you do need to either put in your subscription for Paper Wars, which will actually cover issues 89 through 92, or you can do the single purchase, the single magazine issue purchase as well. So you'll notice here in the Paper Wars subscriptions here, we actually, what I would recommend, if I may make a recommendation, I'm going to recommend definitely look to get the 4 issues. It's really good information. It's a really good way to see what's coming from Compass Games. We do some in-depth articles from either past published, already released games or games that are in the works. Or also with the game that we send out, which I'll show you here in a moment, I want to talk about the issue game in '89. We also have errata counters that we can make available from time to time, so it's also a great way to get support for your game. So I do want to talk about the insert game for Paper Wars issue 89, which will be shipping on June 12th. And that game is Burning Mountains. So I'm going to give you just a little sneak peek here. So I'm displaying here on my screen. This is part of the Paper Wars magazine, but this is just specifically the section that's the rules for the insert game for Paper Wars 89. So here we have Paper Wars. It's a World War I battle game. I'll just flip through the rule booklet here. It's a I'd say it's more of a low complexity game. It's not going to take much time to get into the game, probably reading the rules for 90 minutes. And you should be good to go because you'll see that it's only about 8 pages long. Don't pay attention to the page numbers at the bottom. You see page numbers 35 and 34, 35. That's part of the entire Paper Wars magazine. The actual rules booklet's about 8 pages total, and then there's the charts and tables, which, of course, you can just, I could rotate and you could see that. So just a few tables. So overall, nice World War I battle game by Andrea Brusati that we're releasing. Again, it's covering World War I, 1916 Austrian-Hungarian front. The spring offensive against Italy. So this will be, I think this will be an interesting title to have. I think this will be a nice game to have. It's a new design, hasn't been released before. And again, it's on this World War I era, which is starting to pick up some steam since we had the Red Poppies release as well. So that's a little bit about Burning Mountains. I also have the game map here. So the game map's fairly, it's not a large full game map, as you can see here by the map itself. I could zoom in if you want to see more detail about the maps. I'll go ahead and do that real quickly, just to give you a little more detail on the game map that's going to be included with the game. So here at 100%, you can see we have some entry areas, pretty straightforward, not too many different terrain types for the game. So again, it's meant to be a really playable game. You're going to definitely finish it in a single sitting. Here's the counter sheet. We got the Italians on the left, got the Austro-Hungarians on the right. As I mentioned, for game support, when we can, we'll include additional counters for other Compass games. So if you look at the bottom right, we've got some additional counters for Guam and Saipan, as well as Brezhnev's War, Festung Europa, and Lion of Judah. So what's nice about getting Paper Wars is it's also a great way to supplement and update other games, as we can give you some additional counters for those games. And by the way, I do have the game back. If you want to see the game back, I have that here as well. So again, I think it's a nice looking package. It's a nice single level game on World War I. I think it's going to be, I think it's going to do well for Paper Wars. And I definitely, again, I would urge you to consider subscribing to Paper Wars. We have here issues 89 through 92 is that next block I mentioned, and you just pick the area. If you're domestic United States or Canada, international, you would just basically pick the link you want. And again, I think we'll have a really strong Paper Wars release coming out on June 12th. So the next thing I want to mention about our next few releases is we have Forgotten Legions will be the last release slated for June. So that's a title I did mention in our last episode. And I'll also be working to get out email reminders and do a little bit more marketing on the game. But as you can see here, Forgotten Legions, it's actually 2 games in one. It's Drive on Damascus and Bloody Karen. Those were both previously released games. Drive on Damascus, I think, is the most well-known of the 2 games. And that was an early issue of Wargamer magazine when it was based out of the UK, Keith Poulter as the publisher. And it had a very interesting had an interesting map that had like dot-to-dot movement on it, had no hexagon grid on it, etc. What we've done here is we've packaged 2 games together. I'll show you just a little sneak peek of what one of the map sections looks like with some of the sample counters. What we did with Vance von Borries on this Designer Signature Edition release he opted to make quite a few changes to his design. So typically for a designer edition release, it's the be all end all game publication for that release. So I always ask the designer. I've asked John Edwards for African Campaign. I've asked David Williams for Red Star White Eagle. Do you want to make any changes to the game? And in the case of John Edwards and David Williams, they didn't really want to make any changes, and I don't think the gaming public wanted to see changes either for either game, so we didn't do that. But in the case of Vance's game, he saw ample opportunity to improve the game. So he wanted another swing at the bat to work on these two games. And what he did, basically, the elevator pitch, it's 2 games in 1. What's unique about this and what's new about this, it's both games use the same standard set of rules. So they have a shared game system. Also, the Drive in Damascus game is now using a hex grid, which is what everybody said they wanted to see. They wanted a big change. They wanted the map to be a traditional hex-based map. So we've done that. And then, of course, Vance has added other standard rules as well. So that's a little bit about Forgotten Legions. So 2 games in 1 on World War II. Some obscure topics as well, fairly more obscure battles on World War II. So I hope you'll go ahead and pre-order that game, because we'll be shipping it end of June. So what I'd like to talk about next is what's changed in the release schedule since we last spoke last week, and we had 2 changes to the release schedule. So what happened was we added 2. We took our release schedule, which was through end of July, and our release schedule now goes through end of August. And you'll notice here in our release schedule for end of August, we have 2 new entries, 2 games that are definitely scheduled for August release. We have War for the Union, which is going to be a new designer edition by Rob Bama. Think of this along the lines of like the designer signature edition. I'm not personally involved in this project, but it's the same concept of doing a more deluxe treatment of this game. It was previously released by Clash of Arms many, many years ago, and it's going to be a new designer edition by Rob Bama. And then the other new game for August is Europe in Turmoil, Prelude to the Great War. That is actually a new game design. It's also a card-driven game. So let me show you some sample cards here, just to give you an idea. Again, these aren't final production quality cards, but it's leading to World War I, outbreak of World War I, a political card-driven system. Again, I'd invite you to look at the information about Prelude to the Great War. Focuses more on the political factors and leaders of the time period, and the various factions in the countries and how they were posturing prior to World War I. So these are the 2 new titles we have for August, and this is brand new information that we didn't talk about last week because we didn't have them on our release schedule for August. We hadn't announced our August game releases yet. So this actually gets us up to date on pretty much everything since we last talked a week ago. We've released Blood on the Ohio by John Paniski. We talked about the update in the schedule. We have Mont Lamar is still going to be shipping next, and the release date will be June 10th. Then we have, again, big announcement about Paper Wars. Make sure you get your subscription in. And we talked a little bit about Burning Mountains, and I showed you some of the components for that game. A very playable game, very approachable game, World War I, Italian against the Italians. And then just a reminder about Forgotten Legions. It's our next designer signature edition game, and that will be coming out end of June. And then finally, we touched upon what the month of August. So going 90 days out into August, we did add the War for the Union Designer Edition and Europe in Turmoil, Prelude to the Great War. So again, now what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you about some big news we have for today. So we're going to be making an announcement, and this is why I held this for last. So we have a new pre-order title that we're announcing today. And what I'm going to do really quickly here is, before I announce it, I'm going to actually go over in real time and make it available on the Compass Game website. So it is actually turned off right now. And I'm going to go in here. Give me a moment. while I actually go in. I'm going to log in off screen. You can't see what I'm doing right now. Sorry. But I'm going to go ahead and make this game available. And then we're going to start talking about it. So let me just pull it up here. So let's go back to video. So again, I'm really excited that we could dedicate the majority of our episode today is not just to catch you up on the latest news from Compass Games, but also to make a new pre-order product announcement officially. So without further ado, we have our next pre-order announcement available, and that is going to be a new pre-order title, which we're going to talk about in depth today. So I'm going to pull up the Compass Game website right now since I made a change. So you're seeing me pull it up here in real time. And something that wouldn't have worked a minute ago is going to work now. And we're going to pull it up. So without further ado, our new pre-order title is France 1944, the Allied Crusade in Europe. Notice it's a designer signature edition release. So this is part of the product line from Compass Games that I manage, are these designer signature edition releases. I've talked quite a bit about what the goal is of the designer signature edition. It's again collaborating with the designer to take a new look at the design, decide what changes and enhancements we can make to the game. And we're going to talk quite a bit about what those changes and enhancements to the game are. I'm curious how many of you might be familiar with this game already. France 1944, it's a release. It's a release from Victory Games. So I have a delay in my Facebook live feed right now. So I'm looking over there, and it's probably going to be another 20, 30 seconds before I can see anybody hearing what I'm saying now. But I'd be curious to get a show of hands. Are you familiar with France 1944, the Allied Crusade in Europe by Victory Games? I just want to know if you're familiar with that game or not. And then we'll talk more about it right now. So I want to share with you just about the components before we get into bigger details about the game itself. So Jason Lindsay says he has the game. So great, Jason. So we're going to talk about some of the changes to the game. I do have some preview artwork. Now, this is not final yet, but we will be, because we're going to talk about some additional counters we're adding. So a few things are happening with this game. The biggest change is that it's going to have a mounted map board. So we didn't do any type of a price increase to the game. It's a single map size, but it's going to have a mounted map as far as the shipment. And it's also going to have larger counters. So you can go right now to the Compass website. You can pre-order the game for $50. It's available now. I'm going to update the schedule on the home page as well. So again, this is something that I hope you'll look at. And what I'd like to do now is I want to go deeper into this game. But to do that, I'm going to pull in a special guest we have. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the game designer, Mark Herman, to join us today. And we'll see if we can bring Mark Herman in as a nice surprise special guest for everybody. So I hope you're happy to see. Hi, Mark. I can see you there live. Can you hear me okay? I don't know if you're muted or not.
No,
you're there.
I feel like I tell you, this is like the new home shopping network. This is very exciting.
Well, that is it. We have people pre-ordering the game right now, literally right now. $50.
The jewelry that Mark is showing.
So it is happening now. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just let's do this. Let's walk people through just the original design that you did for Victory Games. Tell us a little bit about the original game, which you're holding up right now.
I guess it's backwards. Is it showing up backwards? Is that what it is?
No, it's showing France 44. It's showing perfectly.
It's only on my side. So anyway, you
yep.
forgot what the original looked like. There's the cover done by Jim Talbot long ago. You know, it's funny. This was a game I just never thought was going to get republished. Not because every so often I do a game that sort of pushes not one but two bounds ahead of where things were at the time. So this is 1986. And I introduced this headquarter activation system and, you know, reaction points. And, you know, it just had a lot going on. But the thing that and so I think from a design, and it had this very interesting, I hope, you know, movement chart and how you could, you know, a unit could like attack multiple times, or it can move, and attack. You know, I wanted all the combinations of moving and attack. And so we came up with a kind of a new way of looking at it. And the one thing it suffered from, I will tell you, is that it was an irregular size box. It had an unmounted map. It had 130 counters.
Not many counters if you think about both sides. Not a lot of combat units at that.
Infantry corps and armored divisions, but it had every unit. But it was 130 counters and a rule booklet, and it felt like there was nothing in the box. I joked that if I could have put a lead brick in it, it would have sold better. But it actually sold, 15,000 copies, so it wasn't like a disaster.
Well, we solved that problem already because it's a mounted map. It's a mounted map board.
It's going to weigh something already. But more importantly, it's going to get a whole fresh set of graphics. The game system itself is, I've been playing it, play testing it, but I did decide that, what has changed is, I think we've advanced in our thinking around the old CRTs. The old CRT were, and there were people who moaned about the CRT being linear, but I have tons of research, and it was, we're not going to go there. But
yeah,
I did come up with a much faster, cleaner combat system that does not require a combat results table. So, and the play testers that I have are really, really like it because it really speeds up play. It does all the things that the original system did. Because again, it was very focused on morale, and morale and terrain, and how people would hold and all that kind of stuff. But it does, in fact, allow it speeds up play. I think it takes about at least 30 minutes off the length of the game, from what I can tell. And the original game ended with the crossing at Remagen, or you had to get to win the game, you had to get across the Rhine, and then the game ended. It ends in March 1945. I think the thing there's sort of the basis of what is changing is just the whole new look. But here's the really big change: is when I talked to John, I said what would make this an interesting project is to cover the end of World War II in Europe, and so it's actually going to be, this is the first of two games. So the first game is France 44 in that system. The map now, and I don't know, I haven't seen, I can't see, I only see you, I don't see the art.
Yeah, I'm not sharing right now.
But we'll hold back, we'll show it to you.
We're going to post the map when Mark Mahaffey's the artist for the project. He's still working on the map, so we're not posting the map art yet, but it will post in probably the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, but what's important is when we did the map, when Mark and I and John worked on the map, we did the entire map at one time. So in other words, it goes from the Atlantic all the way, and the companion game is the Soviet summer offensive of 1944 that goes, so you will get to fight the whole end of the war from the Atlantic to the Soviet Union in the fall of Berlin and the whole thing. And so the real big addition to France 1944, and that's why those blank counters, I have to now add in the order of battle for the German Volks Corps that showed up. These are the kids with Panzerfaust and the old men that they threw into the lines. I got to pull that. I have the information. I'll be pulling that order of battle together, so you'll be able to fight the game further into right till May of 1945 with France 44. When we put out next year the I don't know what we're going to call it.
Russia. I think we'll probably call it Russia 1944, but it might change. But we have France 1944, so
I like it. We'll go with that. France 1944, Russia 1944. We'll start with the June 9th, it was actually July 1944 offensive in the Soviet Union, and ultimately, you're going to basically fight your way into the center. And I got some really cool stuff for a campaign game when you get the game out. So that's going to be very exciting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the gist of it. But what is interesting to me was I have to be honest with you. When I went back and really started looking at it, I realized that a lot of my headquarter activation system that I ended up using in a lot of games subsequently actually originated with this game. So this is sort of like the touchstone that led to, ultimately I used that system in Empire of the Sun. I just didn't realize, I forgot.
That's a great point. Yeah, so the origins, there's some of your greatest work, like Empire of the Sun, the origins of some of those ideas are in France 1944.
Yeah.
So I want to recap something because you've said quite a few things, and I want to make sure everybody understands sort of the goal of the game project, because we talked a lot about things. So the key points to keep in mind about the project of what's changed, because we talked about designer signature edition, and you have the option to decide, what improvements or changes do you want to make. So I'll just recap several of them for everybody. So the biggest headliner about France 1944 by far is the promise of a brand new game design that's going to link together both fronts. So we have France 44, which we have slated for release Q1 of next year, early 2019. But then we're going to have later in 2019, we'll have a separate standalone game, Russia 1944. But that game will also include the rules to link both games together. And as you said, we have to work on the map. The map had to cover both games because we had to figure out the map scales and what the area was going to be and all that. So we had.
Yeah, so what's nice is we already know that the map works all the way from one end to the other, which is going to be great. So from a production point of view and from a design point of view, one of the harder things is already solved and done.
Right. So people are going to have to be patient. Unlike the Home Shopping Network, usually they can get something to somebody in 2 days or 1 day with FedEx. They're going to have to be a little more patient because we've got Q1 will be France 44, and then they're going to be waiting for Russia, and that's going to be later next year. So, but I think it's just exciting because there's not many games out there that cover the latter stages of World War II on both fronts. I can't name.
At least not at this scale, not at the operational level. I mean, you do have, obviously, there's a host of excellent strategic games that cover the whole thing in various guises, but no operational games that I'm aware of, that really do it.
Right. Well, let me talk. Okay, so we talked about the headliner, the big change in terms of what's going to happen with the second companion game, which will be a new design. But also other things I just want to reiterate is we changed the games, the time scale. So the original game, France 44, ended in March of 45. And now we're extending 2 additional months, which is actually 1 month per turn. So it's 2 additional game turns of 2 months. We now extend to May of 45. And then also, that also goes hand in hand with the map. So the single map, France 44, now extends eastward as far east as Berlin. So now we've got new territory to cover. As you mentioned, you got additional units, order of battle additions you have to make for the game to accommodate the change in the time scale.
Now you're fighting. Well, the original game didn't fight in Germany. Now you fight in Germany.
So that's a big change as well. And to your point about playtesting, maybe some games can get reprinted and they don't need playtesting. You just re-edit the rules and do new graphics and that's it. But that's obviously not the case here because you've changed the combat. The combat system's been changed completely. Again, adding 2 months, adding the new territory. There's other changes you've made there as well. So but we've got I got a good crew on it, and I'm personally doing the play testing. At this point because that's for speed. Again, the good news is the game system's not being tested. We're just working with the victory conditions and make sure the play balances.
There's nothing to do with the game system, but it is. I know. And the other thing, of course, the original game only had like 2 or 3 different kinds of terrain. We really opened up the terrain palette. I'm adding, and again, like some of the markers. The original game had a bridgehead rule. Now we'll actually have bridgehead markers. I actually I'll need a couple of markers to show where the Soviets end up. So you win when you link up with the Soviets in the end of the game. So you gotta shake hands on the Elbe if you want to win.
Right. That's a good point. I know we've added, which is we always do with every designer signature edition project. We always look at the original game, and first thing I try to figure out is what additional game markers or mnemonics can we add to make the game more playable or user friendly. So I know the original game had like a supply check, status check, which had to do with activations. So we're adding markers. We're adding markers like out of supply markers. I know we talked about unit activation
markers. We'll have that. Well, one of the other things was hard keeping track of. We used to have to turn the counters. We're going to give you activation markers for the units when who activates them, so you don't have to remember, who's activated, that kind of stuff.
Great. Well, listen, I have a few quick questions that have come through on Facebook Live for you. So I'm going to play Messenger here, and I'm going to ask you from Samuel McAdorny. Sorry, I can't pronounce that name correctly. He said, for Russia in 1944, is it correct that in 1944 the fighting was in Ukraine and Belarus?
Yes. In fact, the offensive. In fact, long ago, SPI did a really, I think it was S&T 43 maybe. They did a game called the Destruction of Army Group Center. So the Russian offensive is often called, is that destruction of Army Group Center. It's a thing that the Soviets in their initial attack, I think, go like 230 miles or so. So it really is the the crack, the center of the German line crumbles, and the only thing that kept it from going bad is the Soviets outran their supplies again as usual. So
Okay.
One of the things that's important in the game, in that game, which I have not yet to really work on, it will have some kind of what I would call railhead kind of, something that'll keep you from just out, doing things you couldn't do historically, because they had a much more, the Soviets had a far more, not as effective, supply system.
Right.
They were not as mechanized. You remember the U.S. Army had tons of trucks, although one of the big problems in what happens in France 44 is gas is accounted for through the supply point. So you do have that problem already in the game. Although I am going to add a few rules for showing the emphasis on knocking out the V1 launch sites. And so there'll be some conditions to that.
That'll be a nice addition to the game, the V1 site. So
the other game was meant to be more of a, the original, but I'm going to have and these will be optional rules. So again, you can play the original, just kind of zoom along.
Right.
But I want to throw a few more. I did that game when I was 1986. Heck, was I even in my 30s yet? So it was a long time ago.
I'm trying to think. When's the last time you've done a World War II game at this scale?
In Europe, this is the only European game I've ever done.
So see, it's an immediate collector's item. People have to have this Mark Herman World War II. They have to have it.
Well, now we're back to the Home Shopping Network.
Back to that. No, I mean, people will be excited anyway because...
I'm excited. I mean, actually, the thing that really makes this exciting for me is one, and I have to give a shout out to Judd Vance.
Mm-hmm.
He almost, you could have bought this game, 3 years ago for 99 cents. I think the shipping was more than the game you would be paying for on eBay, but because there was a lot of copies that it didn't have a lot of following, but Judd all of a sudden, sort of said, hey, what's going on here? And I will tell you, the game was advanced for 1986. Now it's just what I would call a good, cutting edge game design. So it was a little bit too ahead of its time, but now time has caught up. So it's.
Well, let me share my screen again because people have been joining, and I want to make sure that people get a chance to see. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm just things not being very cooperative. Here we go. I'm going to share the screen again because I want people to see the game again, since we're just putting it on pre-order today as a reminder. So let me go ahead. So hopefully I got the box, got the front box cover by Mark Mahaffey up. So hopefully you see that on your end, and I think everybody's viewing it now. So again, for those that have joined late or skip ahead in the recording and missed this part, we've already started the artwork for the game. We've got the front box covers basically done, and the rules are nearly done with the final things you're doing. And then the map board's already in progress, as well as the counter. So we're making really good headway on it.
Yeah, no, it's I like this this cover is very nice. In fact, the other one could just be a bunch of Russian guys in front of a tank walking the other way.
That's right, and with a little nice graphic overlay of the territory, we've got the little army designations in the background, which I think Mahaffey did a really nice touch with. So I think it's going to look quite nice when it comes out. So I had some more questions for you.
Sure.
This is a fun one. Maybe this is more of a question. This is putting pressure on me, I think, because I have to convince you. And we have to see, and I don't know of many games being done on this topic because it seems so hard to do anyway, so I'll throw it at you. David Wren asked you, can I hold out hope for Italy 44?
I mean, let's see how, why not? I mean, let's just see how these two go. Remember, though, in Italy 44, the problem with Italy 44 is it starts... The part that's interesting has already occurred when, June 44, the day before D-Day is the fall of Rome, in Italy. Anzio is resolved, the whole Monte Cassino thing is resolved, and then you're slugging up through the Gothic line, but maybe, it might be doable. Why not have it? Why not?
Okay. Another question from Mike Reinhardt. For you as a designer, Mark, or for me as well as a publisher, have you ever thought about doing any kind of companion apps to aid gameplay for anything? So I assume for the board games, I know we have Vassal. We have Vassal, which takes everything, takes the entire board game to that platform. But I think this is more of an app that's meant to And an app, and like having an app out while you're playing the board game itself and doing something
Yeah.
for any game, not this one, but.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm of two minds of this thing. One, I've played a couple of games. They weren't war games, but there's a couple of games I've played over the last couple of years where you need an app to play the game. In other words, it's one of these games like Clue-like games where there's hidden information. And so not to avoid having a GM, the app solves the hidden information piece. I have to say I found it very clunky. I mean, it was, you're playing the game, you look in this direction, and all of a sudden you got to start messing with a screen, and it breaks up the flow of the game. You're not looking at the other players. So, then there's the question of, do you, is it like the combat system or whatever? And I think that what I've tried to do is make the procedures more intuitive and simpler, like I did with the combat system here. In other words,
right.
Instead of making that difficult, making that simpler and faster, then you don't need the app to figure something out, I guess. But, I have yet to see, in my mind, I've yet to see a app improve the face-to-face game experience. Now, if you're playing solitaire, I could see some value in it. But as a face-to-face thing, not so much.
And same for me, from a publisher perspective, I think, we get a lot of people approaching us willing to volunteer to do things. And it's really just a matter of, I don't think it's anything we would initiate on our own as a publisher, but if somebody came to us and said, hey, I have an idea for, put it this way, the way I like to focus on projects is, the mnemonics, the play aids, anything you can do to the game, whether it's the map, the counters, the rules, anything you can do to make the game more user-friendly. Adding, like I said, adding a bunch of markers that didn't exist in the original game, which could be added to make it, more enjoyable or easier to play. My focus is always on what can we do to improve or enhance the board game experience. But yeah, if somebody comes along and says, hey, I want to do something as well, it's something we would support. I just don't think we would necessarily take a lead or say that's a new angle. I know, like the U-boat game, there was a big Kickstarter out of Europe, the U-boat game that had an app you had to use. And some people, and it was very professionally done. But even then, with a very sophisticated app and UI, people were like, do I really have to rely on an app and use my phone? And I just want to have the board game experience and keep it that way. And personally, my goal is make the board game as user-friendly as possible, where you don't have to rely on an app, period. I feel like there's a failure of the board game if you have to use an app for some board game related items. In other words.
But to this young, I don't know, this man's question, which is a very good one, is I keep always going back to the fundamentals of what is the app doing? Is the app making it so that you don't have to read the rules, which is a lot of people, could you have a game where I don't have to read the rules and the app would handle that? And at that point, are you using the board? Then like a better version of Vassal might be better, something that had the graphics up already and you just, manipulating on the screen. But somehow I have yet to see the app, the electronic and the physical board thing work yet. But again, somebody will figure it out and then we'll go, oh, well, why didn't I think of that? And that'll be the genius of whoever figures this one out.
So I'm going to tell Mike with my phone here, Mike, what I suggest that we do for an app for all Compass games is we have a little France 44 cover button, and when you click on it, you get Mark Herman on video right away, wherever he is, whether he's teaching, if he's teaching in New York or doing, any type of consulting gig, it's automatically going to take you to Mark Herman in the live feed. You can ask him whatever questions you want. Like, you can say, Mark, I'm so glad you have a new combat system. I love the custom dice. We didn't talk about the custom dice, by the way. Custom dice. They're really, so we'll just add a little Compass, every game in Compass, click, and you get the designer, or maybe you get me, so you can yell at me if something's wrong. If there's a rata, you can yell at John, right? So maybe that will be our big app idea. How's that?
Yeah, but as you know, on your Consum world, I answer pretty quickly when people send me a question.
Yeah, you're very good with that. So, and actually, before I let you go, because I really appreciate, I want to let everybody know Mark was so kind. He got on 1 day notice to join us. So, I had the surprise announcement for the game France 1944, and I thought it'd be so much better, more fun to have Mark actually talk about the project than me, which it was much better. Great idea. But to be available on short notice, yeah, it's great. So I personally appreciate you working on the project, working with Compass on something, puts positive pressure on me and the
John,
company.
it was all about you, John. When you asked me to do
job, we need to do a good job, because if we take a game that's been done and do something wrong with it, then that's not good, right? We don't
that's
want
not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
No, of course not.
Come on. Yeah, between you and I, we have like 1 billion years of experience. We'll be fine.
That's right. Project management, right? So exactly.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be
So
fun.
tell us about what projects you're working. So we've talked a lot about just the one project, and we're happy to announce it today. But why don't you share in the last minute or two what else is happening in your life, what projects you're working on, whatever you'd like to share.
Just to be fair, it's your channel. And obviously, anybody wants to look at the stuff I'm working on, you can go over to the GMT's website. Brand new website came up. You can go over there. I've got 2 games running there. So I'll leave it to
Yeah.
We'll stick here. But I think that going back to this project, what's kind of going to be cool is, and I guess the other, of course, as soon as you say you're going to do Russia, so can you do Italy? Well, what about, we'll do the whole thing.
Italy's so hard to do. Everybody, even in OCS, they tried to do Italy. And I guess the situation, the stalemate situation, every time, no matter what the game skill is, somebody says, I want to see Italy 44. The designers are like, this isn't working with playtests or whatever. It's just not working. It's not.
It doesn't, it doesn't, a fun, interesting story. So Fire and Movement, everybody knows what Fire and Movement is. If not, it was a game magazine that did reviews and player articles back in the day. And the editor who worked for Roger McGowan was a guy named Fred Helfrich, who's just a long number of years ago.
Yeah.
But Fred, and I knew Fred, a little bit. And one day we were, one of the Origins or something, we were drinking beers. And I didn't realize he actually fought in the Wehrmacht in northern Italy at the end of the war. He was a young guy, and he was very smart, and so he was in a signals intercept unit in northern Italy. So it was kind of like, wow. And so he told me a lot about, that experience, which I thought was not what I expected to hear that day. And so, Italy's interesting, but I think what's really exciting is to see that, when we get them all together, is to see that gigantic, these 2 big forces coming together to stamp out one of the great evils of this world. And so I think that'll be a really interesting gaming experience. And, it'll be something. That's what really excites me, is getting back in and then, finishing out the story.
Well, I think people, the most positive comments, and on the actual product page that we have, I took some quotes off of Board Game Geek, some of those favorable comments of what was the most left a mark on people, like what they liked about your design approach. And it was really around the activation system and that whole time element, managing your resources and what you commit to doing with your forces within a given, it's a month turn. So as you make commitments, obviously there might be less things you can do in that turn. So there were a lot of positive comments about, that sort of that how to husband resources and that time element, how you intertwine command with that time element in terms of what actions are going to actually take place. So it was I think the design, that's why I know this game, I think it's great we're taking a look at this game again, because I think people are just going to love that for all of World War II now, including Eastern Front.
Yeah, one of the things that although, logistics is absolutely critical to any military game, certainly in modern times, in all times, by the way. But the trick to me as a designer is, look, I like OCS and I like, but somehow I can only take so much of actually dragging every bullet to the front by every truck. And some people love that micromanagement, but I like to be, I want to I like the big arrows on the map stuff. It's more fun. But you have to have logistics. So this game, I think, is a good marriage of, logistic constraint, but not having to deal explicitly with all the details of logistics. And I think that's what I was going for at the time. That's what the HQ activation system allows. Yeah. By controlling the activations, you control the tempo. You cover the fact that you can cut people off and, all those kind of things. But the key is you control the tempo of operations historically without all the work that would come with that if you wanted to really calculate it to the nth degree.
Right. Well, let me do this. Let me close again by I want to spotlight the entire product page this time. I haven't really scrolled through it. So again, those that click on the pre-orders link, I just activated the link live just before introducing Mark today. So this is now available. You need to go to the pre-orders. I don't even have it on the homepage yet for titles that have been recently added to the pre-order list, which is at the bottom left here. So I still have to add that item, and I'll do that by tomorrow morning. But again, I just want to go back to the game again. So let me just navigate back for a moment. And again, so we have some of the artworks posted now. We talk about Russia 44, which will be coming out later in 2019. This game, France 1944, we do a pretty good job with keeping track of schedules and everything. So it is going to be Q1 of next year that France 1944 should be released. And then later in the year, we'll have the companion game that you can also link up end of 2019. And then we talk about here under the detail, we do talk about the fully updated treatment, what that means. We added, like you said, there's a new streamlined combat system that's non-CRT based. We added a new introductory / training scenario, Phallus Gap. The time covered and the map covered has been extended. We talk about that. And the one thing I do want to mention is this is important, and this is actually not just for your game, Mark, but we are now introducing here a mounted map for your single map game. And what I do want to mention, it's something I've been working on today to help others. We do have some other titles from Compass that are single map games as well. And this is a new direction. Hey, that's sort of a slogan from Compass, directions in gaming. I gotta watch out for that. So what I've done here is for games that we know we've committed to do mounted maps for, I've added a little graphic. I don't know if you noticed that. Under the components section, there's now a little icon that says, hey, this is going to have a mounted map to it. It's not going to be a paper map. So we're now taking a direction, and it's going to take some, we're going to do some bit, it's going to be a bit of a transition time period for this to happen. So it's not going to be every single game. And really, it's going to be the single map games only that we're going to be focusing on. We're going to start doing mounted map boards for the single map games. And yours being a good example of that. Yours being one of the first ones, Mark, that will be a mounted map, because you said France 44 was too light. You know, people don't develop biceps because I was holding France 44, so you say I have no biceps because I had the victory.
You look like you're working out.
So I'm going to have nice biceps because I'm going to have a mounted map board when the Compass version comes. But I want to mention this because it's important, I think, for customers of Compass, because it is going to be a new direction. You're going to hear more and more about this. So I want you to know there is a nice graphic I'm adding to product pages to make it more obvious what will have a single map that's mounted. And also don't worry about the price being increased to do that. We're not going to, there's no slap of the wrist or any cost impact. We're able to improve the quality of the components and not change the price. So for the price of this game, pre-order price of $50 for everything they're getting, they're actually also going to get a nice mounted map, some custom dice. You know, it's going to be a nice overall package when we're done with it. So I'm excited about it. I can't wait to get the project finished in the next 2 months. Then we get it off to the printers. But I'm just so happy that you could introduce the game to everybody today. And I know we'll have this recorded and edited so we can have people learn more about this game, France 1944, and what changes are coming in it, which people I think will look forward to if they already own the original game. So with that, any closing remarks, Mark, at all before we?
No, in fact, as soon as I get off, I'm going to go back to my table over there, and I'm going to work on France 44.
Well, I can't end on a better note than that. You've got me beat. So we're going to end with that. I want to thank everybody for joining us on Facebook Live today. Thanks to those that also joined us by registering through the webcast. Again, we'll have an edited HD version of this Compass Game Live Episode 4. We'll have it posted tomorrow. And help us please spread the word. And per the Home Shopping Network, please put in your pre-order for France 1944 today. And we'll add the app with Mark's video feed to it if you do that. How's that?
Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mark, so much. Thanks again.